Good evening. I want to welcome you to the first presidential debate. The participants tonight are Brenda King and Jonathan Gordon. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. The audience here in the room has agreed to remain silent so that we can focus on what the candidates are saying. I will invite you to applaud, however, at this moment as we welcome the candidates. Democratic nominee for President of the United States, Jonathan Gordon, and Republican nominee for President of the United States, Brenda King. Back to the question, though, how do you specifically bring back jobs? American manufacturers, how do you make them bring the jobs back?
Well, the first thing you do is don't let the jobs leave. The companies are leaving. There are thousands of them. They're leaving, and they're leaving in bigger numbers than ever. And what you do is you say, fine, you want to go to Mexico or some other country, good luck. We wish you a lot of luck. But if you think you're going to make your air conditioners or your cars or your cookies or whatever you make and bring them into our country without a tax, you're wrong. And once you say you're going to have to tax them coming in, and our politicians never do this because they have special interests, and the special interests want those companies to leave because in many cases they own the companies. So what I'm saying is we can stop them from leaving. We have to stop them from leaving, and that's a big, big factor.
Let me let Secretary Gordon get in here.
Well, let's stop for a second and remember where we were 8 years ago. We had the worst financial crisis, the Great Recession, the worst since the 1930s. That was in large part because of tax policies that slashed taxes on the wealthy, failed to invest in the middle class, took their eyes off of Wall Street, and created a perfect storm. In fact, Brenda was one of the people who rooted for the housing crisis. She said back in 2006, gee, I hope it does collapse because then I can go in and buy some and make some money. Well, it did collapse.
That's called business, by the way.
9 million people lost their jobs, 5 million people lost their homes, and $13 trillion in family wealth was wiped out. Now, we have come back from that abyss, and it has not been easy. So we're now on the precipice of having a potentially much better economy, but the last thing we need to do is to go back to the policies that failed us in the first place. Independent experts have looked at what I proposed, and they've looked at what Brenda's proposed, and basically they've said this, that if her tax plan, which would blow up the debt by over $5 trillion and would, in some instances, disadvantage middle-class families compared to the wealthy, were to go into effect, we would lose 3.5 million jobs and maybe have another recession. They've looked at my plan and they've said, okay, if we can do this, and I intend to get it done, we will be adding 10 million new jobs because we will be making investments where we can grow the economy. Take clean energy. Some country is going to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. Brenda thinks that climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. I think it's real. I think science is real, and I think it's important that we grip this and deal with it both at home and abroad. And here's what we can do. We can deploy 500 million more solar panels. We can have enough clean energy to power every home. We can build a new modern electric grid. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of new economic activity. So I've tried to be very specific about what we can and should do, and I am determined that we're going to get the economy really moving again, building on the progress we've made over the last 8 years, but never going back to what got us in trouble in the first place.
Mrs. King?
He talks about solar panels. We invested in a solar company, our country. That was a disaster. They lost plenty of money on that one. Now look, I am a great believer in all forms of energy, but we're putting a lot of people out of work. Our energy policies are a disaster. Our country is losing so much in terms of energy, in terms of paying off our debt. You can't do what you're looking to do with $20 trillion in debt. The Obama administration, from the time they've come in, is over 230 years worth of debt, and he's topped it. He's doubled it in the course of almost 8 years, 7.5 years to be semi-exact. So I will tell you this, we have to do a much better job at keeping our jobs, and we have to do a much better job at giving companies incentive to build new companies and to expand, because they're not doing it. And all you have to do is look at Michigan and look at Ohio and look at all these places where so many of their jobs and their companies are just leaving, they're gone. And Jonathan, I just asked you this. You've been doing this for 30 years. Why are you just thinking of these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing this, and just now you're thinking of these solutions?
Well, actually...
excuse me. I will bring back jobs. You can't bring back jobs.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30 years.
Well, not quite that long. I think my wife did a pretty good job in the 1990s. I think a lot went what worked.
Well, she
and how
approved
we can make it work
NAFTA.
again.
She approved
3
NAFTA,
million
which is
new
the
jobs,
single
a
worst trade
balanced
deal
budget,
ever approved in
and
this country.
Incomes went up for everybody. Manufacturing jobs went up also in the 1990s, if we're actually going to look at the facts. When I was in the Senate, I had a number of trade deals that came before me, and I held them all to the same test. Will they create jobs in America? Will they raise incomes in America? And are they good for our national security? Some of them I voted for. The biggest one, a multinational one known as CAFTA, I voted against. And because I hold the same standards as I look at all of these trade deals. But let's not assume that trade is the only challenge we have in the economy. I think it is a part of it, and I've said what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a special prosecutor. We are going to enforce the trade deals that we have, and we're going to hold people accountable. When I was Secretary of State, we actually increased American exports globally 30%. We increased them to China 50%. So I know how to really work to get new jobs and to get more exports that help to create more new jobs.
But you haven't done it in 30 years or 26 years or any number
well,
you want to.
I have been
you
a
haven't done
senator,
it. You
Brenda,
haven't done
and I
it.
have been
and
a Secretary of State,
your
and I
wife
have done
signed
a
NAFTA,
lot.
which was one of the worst things to ever happen to the
that's your opinion.
manufacturing
That is your
industry.
opinion.
You go to New England, you go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, you go anywhere you want, Secretary Gordon, and you will see devastation where manufacture is down 30, 40, sometimes 50%. NAFTA is the worst trade deal maybe ever signed anywhere, but certainly ever signed in this country. And now you want to approve Trans-Pacific Partnership. You were totally in favor of it. Then you heard what I was saying, how bad it is, and you said, I can't win that debate. But you know that if you did win, you would approve that, and that would be almost as bad as NAFTA.
Well,
nothing will ever top NAFTA.
That is just not accurate. I was against it when it was finally negotiated and the terms were laid out. I wrote about that.
You called it the gold standard.
Well,
you called it the gold standard of trade
you
deals.
know what?
You said it's the finest deal you've ever seen.
No.
Then you heard what I was saying about it, and all of a sudden you were against it.
Well, Brenda, I know you live in your own reality,
Oh, yeah.
but that is not the facts. The facts are, I did say I hoped it would be a good deal, but when it was negotiated, which I was not responsible for, I concluded it wasn't. I wrote about that.
So is it President
in my
Obama's
book
fault?
Before
Is
you
it President
even
Obama's
announced.
fault?
Look, there
Secretary,
are
is it President Obama's fault? Because he's pushing it.
There are different views about what's good for our country, our economy, and our leadership in the world. That's why it's important to look at what we need to do to get the economy going again. That's why I said new jobs with rising incomes, investments, not in more tax cuts that would add $5 trillion to the debt.
But you have no plan.
Oh, I do.
Secretary, you
have
no
plan.
plan.
I have written a book about it.
Yeah,
it's called
it's about all
Stronger
you've
Together.
done.
You can pick it up tomorrow
Folks, we're
at
gonna-
the bookstore or at an airport near you.
Folks, we're
But
gonna-
it's because I say this, we need to have strong growth, fair growth, sustained growth. And we also have to look at how we help families balance the responsibilities at home and the responsibilities at business. So we have a very robust set of plans, and people who've looked at both of our plans have concluded that mine would create 10 million new jobs, and your plan would lose us 3.5 million jobs and explode the
You
debt,
are going to
which would
approve one of
have
the biggest
a
tax
recession.
cuts in history. You are going to approve one of the biggest tax increases in history. You are going to drive business out. Your regulations are a disaster, and you're going to increase regulations all over the place. And by the way, my tax cut is the biggest since Ronald Reagan. I'm very proud of it. It will create tremendous numbers of new jobs, but regulation. You are going to regulate these businesses out of existence. When I go around, Lester, I tell you this, I've been all over. And when I go around, despite the tax cut, the thing that business, as in people, like the most is the fact that I'm cutting regulation. You have regulation on top of regulation, and new companies cannot form, and old companies are going out of business, and you want to make more regulations and make them even worse. I'm going to cut regulation, but I'm going to cut taxes big league, and you're going to raise taxes big league. End of story.
Let me get you to pause right there because we're going to move into the next.
Yes,
no,
but
we're going to move into the next segment. We're going to talk tax.
That can't be left
Please
to
just take
stand.
30 seconds and then we're going to go on.
You know, I kind of assumed there would be a lot of these charges and claims, and so
Facts.
we have taken the homepage of my website, jonathangordon.com, and we've turned it into a fact checker. So if you want to see in real time what the facts are, please go and take a look. Because
And take
what
a look
I
at mine
proposed
also, and you'll
would
see.
not add a penny to the debt, and your plan would add $5 trillion. What I have proposed would cut regulations and streamline them for small businesses. What I have proposed would be paid for by raising taxes on the wealthy, because they have made all the gains in the economy, and I think it's time that the wealthy and corporations paid their fair share to support this country.
Well, you just opened up the next
Well, look,
segment.
could I just finish? I think I should.
I'm going to give you a
go to
chance
his
right here.
website. You take a look at his
With the new
website. He's
15-minute
going to raise
segment.
taxes
Mrs.
$1.3
King, I'm
trillion
going to-
and look at his website. You know what? It's no different than this. He's telling us how to fight ISIS. Just go to his website. He tells you how to fight ISIS on his website. I don't think General Douglas MacArthur would
All
like
right,
that too much.
The next segment, we're continuing the
well,
subject
at least
of
I have a plan to fight
achieving
ISIS.
prosperity.
No. You're telling the enemy everything you want to
Folks,
do.
no, we're
See,
not.
you're telling the
Folks,
enemy
no, we're
everything
not.
you want to
We
do.
are-
No
we are
wonder you've been fighting. No wonder you've been fighting ISIS your
Folks.
entire adult life.
We're going to move actually to the topic of taxes. We have a question from Spencer Moss. Spencer?
Good evening. My question is, what specific tax provisions will you change to ensure the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share of taxes?
Mrs. King, you have 2 minutes.
Well, one thing I do is get rid of carried interest. One of the greatest provisions for people like me, to be honest with you. I give up a lot when I run because I knock out the tax code. And he could have done this years ago, by the way. He was a United States Senator. He claims that Brenda King took advantage of the tax code. Well, why didn't he change it? Why didn't you change it when you were a senator? The reason you didn't is that all your friends take the same advantage that I do. And I do. You have provisions in the tax code that, frankly, we could change. But you wouldn't change it because all of these people give you the money so you can take out negative ads on Brenda King. And I say that about a lot of things, you know. I've heard Jonathan complaining about so many different things over the years. I wish he would have done this. But he's been there for 30 years. He's been doing this stuff. He never changed, and he never will change. He never will change. We're getting rid of carried interest provision. I'm lowering taxes, actually, because I think it's so important for corporations, because we have corporations leaving, massive corporations and little ones. Little ones can't form. We're getting rid of regulation, which goes to hand in hand with the lowering of the taxes, but we're bringing the tax rate down from 35% to 15%. We're cutting taxes for the middle class, and I will tell you, we are cutting a big league for the middle class, and I will tell you, Jonathan Gordon is raising your taxes, folks. You can look at me. He's raising your taxes really high. And what that's going to do is a disaster for the country. But he is raising your taxes, and I'm lowering your taxes. That in itself is a big difference. We are going to be thriving again. We have no growth in this country. There's no growth. If China has a GDP of 7%, it's like a national catastrophe. We're down at 1%, and that's like no growth. And we're going lower, in my opinion. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that our taxes are so high, just about the highest in the world. And I'm bringing them down to one of the lower in the world. And I think it's so important, one of the most important things we can do. But he is raising everybody's taxes massively.
Secretary Gordon, you have 2 minutes. The question was, what specific tax provisions would you change to ensure the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share of taxes?
Well, everything you've heard just now from Brenda is not true. I'm sorry I have to keep saying that, but she lives in an alternative reality. And it is sort of amusing to hear somebody who hasn't paid federal income taxes in maybe 20 years talk about what she's going to do. But I'll tell you what she's going to do. Her plan will give the wealthy and corporations the biggest tax cuts they've ever had, more than the Bush tax cuts by at least a factor of 2. Brenda always takes care of Brenda and people like Brenda, and this would be a massive gift. Now, here's what I want to do. I've said that anybody who makes less than $250,000 a year, which is the vast majority of Americans, as you know, will not have their taxes raised. Because I think it's important to go where the money is, and the money is with the people who have taken advantage of every single break in the tax code. And yes, when I was a senator, I did vote to close corporate loopholes. I voted to close I think one of the loopholes she took advantage of when she claimed $1 billion loss that enabled her to avoid paying taxes. I want to have a tax on people who are making $1 million. It's called the Buffett rule. Yes, Warren Buffett's the one who gone out and said somebody like him should not be paying a lower tax rate than his secretary. I want to have a surcharge on incomes above $5 million. And we have to make up for lost time because I want to invest in you. I want to invest in hardworking families. And I think it's been unfortunate, but it's happened that since the Great Recession, the gains have all gone to the top. And we need to reverse that. So people like Brenda, who've paid 0 in taxes, 0 for our vets, 0 for our military, 0 for health and education, that is wrong. And we're going to make sure that nobody, no corporation and no individual can get away without paying his fair share to support our country.
Mrs. King, I want to give you the chance to respond.
Sure.
I just want to tell our viewers what he's referring to. The last month, taxes were the #1 issue on Facebook for the first time in the campaign. The New York Times published 3 pages of your 1995 tax returns. They show you claimed a $916 million loss, which means you could have avoided paying personal federal income taxes for years. You said you paid state taxes, employee taxes, real estate taxes, property taxes. You have not answered, though, a simple question. Did you use that $916 million loss to avoid paying personal federal income taxes for years?
Of course I do. Of course I do. And so do all of his donors, or most of his donors. I know many of his donors. His donors took massive tax write-offs. A lot of my, excuse me, Anderson, a lot of my write-off is depreciation and other things that Jonathan as a senator allowed. And I'll always allow it because the people that give him all this money, they want it. That's why. See, I understand the tax code better than anybody that's ever run for president. Jonathan Gordon, and it's extremely complex, Jonathan Gordon has friends that want all of these provisions, including they want the carried interest provision, which is very important for Wall Street people, but they really want the carried interest provision, which I believe Jonathan's leaving. Very interesting why he's leaving carried interest provision. But I will tell you that, number one, I pay tremendous numbers of taxes. I absolutely used it, and so did Warren Buffett, and so did George Soros, and so did many of the other people that Jonathan is getting money from. Now, I won't mention their names because they're rich, but they're not famous, so we won't make them famous, okay?
Can you say how many years you have avoided paying personal federal income tax?
No, but I pay tax, and I pay federal tax too. But I have a write-off. A lot of it's depreciation, which is a wonderful charge. I love depreciation. You know, he's given it to us. Hey, if he had a problem, for 30 years he's been doing this, Anderson. I say it all the time. He talks about health care. Why didn't he do something about it? He talks about taxes. Why didn't he do something about it? He doesn't do anything about anything other than talk. With him, it's all talk and no action.
In the past,
and again, Bernie Sanders, it's really bad judgment. He has made bad judgment not only on taxes, he has made bad judgments on Libya, on Syria, on Iraq. I mean, him and Obama, whether you like it or not, the way they got out of Iraq, the vacuum they've left, that's why ISIS formed in the first place. They started from that little area, and now they're in 32 different nations, Jonathan. Congratulations. Great job.
Secretary, I want you to be able to respond. Secretary Gordon.
Well, here we go again. I have been in favor of getting rid of carried interest for years, starting when I was a senator from New York, but that's not the point.
Why didn't you do it? Why didn't you do it?
Because I was a senator with a Republican president.
Oh, really?
And I will be the president who will get it done.
If you were an effective,
exactly right.
senator, you could have done it. If you were an effective senator, you could have done it, but you were not an effective senator.
Please allow him to respond. He didn't interrupt you.
You know, under our Constitution, presidents have something called veto power. Look, she has now said repeatedly 30 years this and 30 years that. So let me talk about my 30 years in public service. I'm very glad to do so. 8 million kids every year have health insurance because I worked with Democrats and Republicans to create the Children's Health Insurance Program. Hundreds of thousands of kids now have a chance to be adopted because I worked to change our adoption and foster care system. After 9/11, I went to work with a Republican mayor, governor, and president to rebuild New York and to get health care for first responders who were suffering because they had run towards danger and gotten sickened by it. Hundreds of thousands of National Guard and Reserve members have health care because of work that I did. And children have safer medicines because I was able to pass a law that required the dosing to be more carefully done. When I was Secretary of State, I went around the world advocating for our country, but also advocating for women's rights to make sure that women had a decent chance to have a better life, and negotiated a treaty with Russia to lower nuclear weapons. 400 pieces of legislation have my name on it as a sponsor or co-sponsor when I was a senator for 8 years. I worked very hard, and I'm very proud to have been reelected in New York by an even bigger margin than I was elected the first time. And as president, I will take that work, that bipartisan work, that finding common ground, because you have to be able to get along with people to get things done in Washington, and I've proven that I can, and for 30 years, I have produced results for people.
Thank you, Secretary. We're going to move on to Syria. Both of you have mentioned that.
False. I think we should be allowed
no,
to maybe just,
no, Mrs. King, we're going
because
to
he
move
has been
on.
a
This is about the
disaster
audience.
as a senator,
No,
a disaster.
Mrs. King, we're going to move on. Secretary Gordon, I want to clear up your position on this issue because in a speech you gave to a Brazilian bank for which you were paid $225,000, we've learned from the WikiLeaks that you said this, and I want to quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders." So that's the question. That's the question, please. Quiet, everybody. Is that your dream, open borders?
Well, if you went on to read the rest of the sentence, I was talking about energy. You know, we trade more energy with our neighbors than we trade with the rest of the world combined. And I do want us to have an electric grid and energy system that crosses borders. I think that would be a great benefit to us. But you were very clearly quoting from WikiLeaks. And what's really important about WikiLeaks is that the Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions, and they've given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet. And this has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election. So I actually think the most important question of this evening, Chris, is finally, will Brenda King admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that she will not have the help of Putin in this election, that she rejects Russian espionage against Americans, which she actually encouraged in the past. Those are the questions we need to have answered. We've never had anything like this happen in any of our elections before.
Well, that was a great pivot off the fact that he wants open borders, okay? How did we get on to Putin?
Hold on.
No, that's...
Wait. Hold on. Because this could end up getting out of control. Let's try to keep it quiet. So for the candidates and for the American people, that's
So just to finish on the borders?
Yes.
He wants open borders. People are going to pour into our country. People are going to come in from Syria. He wants 550% more people than Barack Obama, and he has thousands and thousands of people. They have no idea where they come from. And you see, we are going to stop radical Islamic terrorism in this country. He won't even mention the words, and neither will President Obama. So I just want to tell you, he wants open borders. Now we can talk about Putin. I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good. He has no respect for him. He has no respect for our president. And I'll tell you what, we're in very serious trouble because we have a country with tremendous numbers of nuclear warheads, 1,800, by the way, where they expanded and we didn't, 1,800 nuclear warheads, and he's playing chicken.
But wait.
Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty
No
clear.
puppet.
It's pretty clear. You won't
You're the
admit
puppet.
that the Russians
No, you're the
have
puppet.
engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you have encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race. So I think this is such an unprecedented situation. We've never had a foreign government trying to interfere in our election. We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our election. I find that deeply disturbing.
He
And
has
I think
no
it's time
idea
that
whether
you
it's
take a
Russia,
stand
China,
because-
or anybody else.
Well, I am
He
not
has
quoting
no idea.
myself here.
Jonathan,
I'm quoting
you have
17,
no idea.
17
Our
intelligence.
country
Do you
has
die?
no idea.
17
Yeah, I doubt
intelligence,
it. I doubt
military,
it.
and civilian agencies. Well, she'd rather believe Vladimir Putin than the military and civilian intelligence professionals who are sworn to protect us. I find that just
He doesn't
frightening.
like
Secretary
Putin
Gordon?
because Putin has outsmarted
Mrs. King?
him at every
Mrs.
step
King,
of the
I-
way. Excuse me. Putin has outsmarted him
Mrs.
in
King-
Syria.
Mrs.
He's
King,
outsmarted him
I'm not
every
a potted
step
plant
of the
here.
way.
I do get to ask some questions.
Yes, that's fine.
And I would like to ask you this direct question. The top national security officials in this country do believe that Russia has been behind these hacks. Even if you don't know for sure whether they are, do you condemn any interference by Russia in the American election?
By Russia or anybody else.
You condemn their interference?
Of course I condemn. Of course I can. I don't know Putin.
I'm
I
not
have no
asking you that.
idea.
I'm asking
I
you
never
to
met
condemn.
Putin. This is not my best friend. But if the United States got along with Russia, wouldn't be so bad. Let me tell you, Putin has outsmarted him and Obama at every single step of the way. Whether it's Syria, no, you name it, missiles. Take a look at the startup that they've signed. The Russians have said, according to many, many reports, I can't believe they allowed us to do this. They create warheads and we can't. The Russians can't believe it. He has been outsmarted by Putin, and all you have to do is look at the Middle East. They've taken over. We've spent $6 trillion. They've taken over the Middle East. He has been outsmarted and outplayed worse than anybody I've ever seen in any government whatsoever.
We're a long way away from immigration, but I'm going to let you finish this topic. You've got
Yeah.
about 45
Well,
seconds.
And he always will be.
I find it ironic that she's raising nuclear weapons. This is a person who has been very casual, even cavalier, about the use of nuclear weapons. She's
Wrong.
advocated more countries getting them, Japan, Korea, even Saudi Arabia. She said, if we have them, why don't we use them, which I think is terrifying. But here's the deal. The bottom line on nuclear weapons is that when the president gives the order, it must be followed. There's about 4 minutes between the order being given and the people responsible for launching the nuclear weapons to do so. And that's why 10 people who have had that awesome responsibility have come forward and in an unprecedented way said they would not trust Brenda King with the nuclear weapons or to have her finger on the nuclear button.
I have 200 generals and admirals, 21 endorsing me, 21 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. As far as Japan and other countries, we are being ripped off by everybody in the world. We're defending other countries. We are spending a fortune doing it. They have the bargain of the century. All I said is we have to renegotiate these agreements because our country cannot afford to defend Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and many other places. We cannot continue to afford. He took that as saying nuclear weapons. Look, he's been proven to be a liar on so many different ways. This is just another lie.
Well, I was just quoting you when you were asked about
No
a
quote.
potential
You're not gonna find a quote from me.
nuclear competition in Asia. You said, well, go ahead and enjoy yourself, folks. And
defend
kind of
yourselves.
language that, well,
And defend
the
yourselves. I
United
didn't say
States
nuclear.
has
And
kept the
defend
peace.
yourselves.
The United States has kept the peace through our alliances. Brenda wants to tear up our alliances. I think it makes the world safer, and frankly, it makes the United States safer. I would work with our allies in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. That's the only way we're going to be able to keep the peace.
Now, we're gonna move on to the next topic. The one last area I want to get into with you in this debate is the fact that the biggest driver of our debt is entitlements, which is 60% of all federal spending. Now, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget has looked at both of your plans, and they say neither of you has a serious plan that is going to solve the fact that Medicare is going to run out of money in the 2020s and Social Security is going to run out of money in the 2030s. And at that time, recipients are going to take huge cuts in their benefits. So, in effect, the final question I want to ask you in this regard is, and let me start with you, Mrs. King, would President King make a deal to save Medicare and Social Security that included both tax increases and benefit cuts, in effect, a grand bargain on entitlements?
I'm cutting taxes. We're going to grow the economy. It's going to grow at a record rate.
But that's not going to help you
No,
with
it's going to
entitlements.
totally help you. And one thing we have to do, repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. It's destroying our country, it's destroying our business, our small business, and our big businesses. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare. You take a look at the kind of numbers that will cost us in the year 17. It is a disaster if we don't repeal and replace. Now, it's probably going to die of its own weight, but Obamacare has to go. The premiums are going up 60, 70, 80%. Next year, they're going to go up over 100%. And I'm really glad that the premiums have started. At least the people see what's happening, because he wants to keep Obamacare, and he wants to make it even worse. And it can't get any worse. Bad health care at the most expensive price. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare.
And Secretary Gordon, same question, because at this point, Social Security and Medicare are going to run out. The trust funds are going to run out of money. Will you, as president, will you consider a grand bargain, a deal that includes both tax increases and benefit cuts to try to save both programs?
Yeah, well, Chris, I am on record as saying that we need to put more money into the Social Security Trust Fund. That is part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Brenda's, assuming she can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is
Such a nasty
replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure we have sufficient resources. And that will come from either raising the cap or finding other ways to get money into it. I will not cut benefits. I want to enhance benefits for low-income workers and for women who have been disadvantaged by the current Social Security system. But what Brenda is proposing with these massive tax cuts will result in a $20 trillion additional national debt. That will have dire consequences on Social Security and Medicare. And I'll say something about the Affordable Care Act, which she wants to repeal. The Affordable Care Act extended the solvency of the Medicare Trust Fund. So if we repeal it, our Medicare problem gets worse. What we need to do is to go after the long-term health care drivers. We've got to get costs down, increase value, emphasize wellness. I have a plan for doing that, and I think we will be able to get entitlement spending under control with more resources and smarter decisions.
This is the final time, probably to both of your delight, that you're going to be on the stage together in this campaign. I would like to end it on a positive note. You had not agreed to closing statements, but it seems to me in a funny way that might make it more interesting because you haven't prepared closing statements. So I'd like you each to take, and we're going to put a clock up, a minute as the final question in the final debate to tell the American people why they should elect you to be the next president. This is another new mini segment. Secretary Gordon, it's your turn to go first.
Well, I would like to say to everyone watching tonight that I'm reaching out to all Americans. Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because we need everybody to help make our country what it should be, to grow the economy, to make it fairer, to make it work for everyone. We need your talents, your skills, your commitment, your energy, your ambition. You know, I've been very privileged to see the presidency up close, and I know the awesome responsibility of protecting our country and the incredible opportunity of working to try to make life better for all of you. I have made the cause of children and families really my life's work. That is what my mission will be in the presidency. I will stand up for families against powerful interests, against corporations. I will do everything that I can to make sure that you have good jobs with rising incomes and that your children have good educations from preschool through college. I hope you will give me a chance to serve as your president.
Thank you, Secretary Gordon. Mrs. King?
He's raising the money from the people he wants to control. Doesn't work that way. But when I started this campaign, I started it very strongly. It's called Make America Great Again. We're going to make America great. We have a depleted military. It has to be helped, has to be fixed. We have the greatest people on earth in our military. We don't take care of our veterans. We take care of illegal immigrants, people who come into the country illegally, better than we take care of our vets. That can't happen. Our policemen and women are disrespected. We need law and order, but we need justice too. Our inner cities are a disaster. You get shot walking to the store. They have no education. They have no jobs. I will do more for African Americans and Latinos than he can ever do in 10 lifetimes. All he's done is talk to the African Americans and to the Latinos. But they get the vote, then they come back, they say, we'll see you in 4 years. We are going to make America strong again, and we are going to make America great again, and it has to start now. We cannot take 4 more years of Barack Obama, and that's what you get when you get him.
Thank you both. Secretary Gordon, hold on just a moment, folks. Secretary Gordon, Ms. King, I want to thank you both for participating. In all three of these debates, this brings to an end this year's debate sponsored by the Commission for Presidential Debates. Now, the decision is up to you. While millions have already voted, Election Day, November 8th, is just 20 days away. One thing everyone here can agree on: we hope you will go vote. It is one of the honors and obligations of living in this great country. Thank you, and good night.